Hello, everyone. Today I'm being joined with Jodi Milner, who is the author of Stonebearers Redemption, which is book 3 of the Shadow Barrier Trilogy. Now, I've known Jodi for a while, and I've done the other 2 books of this and also some of your short stories, Jodi, in reviews that are in anthologies. And so we're just going to kind of jump right in. What I've been starting telling people, if you like what you're seeing here, please subscribe. It helps me to be able to do more with this YouTube channel and things that I'm trying to accomplish further out. So, Stonebearers Redemption. And by the way, hi, Jodi. I didn't give you a chance to say hi.
Hi, Dan. Happy to be here.
Good. So, just in a nutshell, a 30-second pitch, an elevator pitch, however you want to call it, what would you say is the story of Stonebearers Redemption?
So, like you said, it is the third in a trilogy. This is bringing our noble heroine to the end of her story. And this story is a story of magic, and it's a story of learning and of trust. So we see her go from the very beginning when she learns about this magic that's going to be part of her life. And then we see her go forward into the story where she learns to embrace it. And I'm going to try to be very, very vague for spoilers and all that, because you do want to start at the beginning. This story is a portal fantasy. So she finds there's a threat in a village she grows up in, and she has been tasked along with some very, very cool characters to address that threat, and in the process gets pulled into a portal world that is an inverse of the world that we know. And the colors are inverted too. So it was something I had a lot of fun coming up with.
Okay, so let's go right with that. You're saying there's a lot of fun coming up with. Now, I do know because of the reviews I did with the first 2 books, you had actually reached out for getting some feedback from people because you were struggling with the story arc of Katira, the lead character here, and how book 3 was going to go into. You want to go into some of the, if you'd like, some of the struggles you were facing and how you kind of worked around those?
Absolutely. So, because I was trying to give my main character a really good ending, I wanted her to come out as kind of this very strong character, but also growing as a person in her understanding of how the world works, because she does start the story very naive, and we see her become a little smarter and a little bit more savvy when it comes to working with other people. And so I did want to give her a really, really good ending. And my first attempt at writing the book, I kind of had a good idea of how Katira was going to work with all the different opposing forces, because we've got a really nasty baddie in this book, and her name's Roth. Like the grapes of wrath, but if you have a really bad accent, Roth. Um, yes, that's probably where her name came from. And so my biggest challenge actually with this story is I wrote my villain's ending wrong. I had Katira's ending kind of figured out because I'm like, I know who she's going to end up with. I know the circumstances of how that's going to end, and how the overarching really big problem of how to deal with this awful villain, Roth. I kind of knew how that was going to be, but I wrote my poor villain wrong, and I got called on it. This is why we have editors. Because my very dear editor friend, she pulled me aside. She's like, we need to have lunch. You never want to hear that. By the way, you never want to hear, we want to have lunch, because that means you've done something really bad and they want to tell you in person so they can kind of soothe the blow instead of like in an impersonal email that says you done screwed up. Because I gave my villain a redemption arc the very first time I wrote the book. And you can't do that unless you've set it up through the entire story that there was this want for her to need a redemption arc. And so we have this title, Stonebearers Redemption. And I accidentally gave the villain the redemption arc, which is, yeah, mistakes were made. And so I had to rewrite the book from the ground up with all the key pieces, but with this entirely reinvented idea of how this villain is going to end her story. And so that was tremendously difficult because um, COVID was happening right about the same time, and I ended up being a homeschool mom to three kids. Yeah, my head was not in a good space for a really long time, and I think some like I it might have clouded my judgment a little bit.
Well, I think
Uh,
you
so
worked through it.
so if it worked out brilliantly, I'm happy to hear that because it felt like I was dragging through, like just dragging myself through a bed of nails. I'm like, why is this so hard this time? And I think it's because I had so many like hopes and so many wants for this book to just be so awesome.
Okay.
And you know what all like you want it to be not just like, oh, I liked it. I want it to be like, ooh, shiny. Like it needs to be I wanted to be really exciting and really good.
Okay. Well, I think you did a really good job of bringing the story together. Because one of the things we kind of mentioned before, you and I talking, and that is all the way through this, you have some very strong themes. And I mean, there's themes that are not just in the third book of Redemption, but go all the way back to the very first. So were those themes and the arcs that you're building into the, each book and then the overarch, was that theme something that you had planned out from the very beginning?
I wish I could say yes. Um, I have never been good at being like, this is the moral nugget of my story, and this is what we're going to keep revolving back to. I've never been really good at really sitting down and fixing that in my mind and having this be my goal, this be my theme. And so as I'm going through the different stories, different things started floating up that I always tend to go back to just as my personal preferences. And I always go back to the sense of family and the family ties and how different relationships bond people together. And so in this whole trilogy, we actually play with this idea of relationships between all of these different characters because several characters in this book are immortals. And how does that change a relationship? And so we see immortals who have been companionship for hundreds of years, and then we see this young budding love story. It's not a romance, but there's romantic elements and maybe a kiss or two, just a tiny bit.
I don't think you have to worry there. I
It's
remember
not a
hearing,
kissing book.
as I remember hearing that for any good story to work, you have to have elements of romance and elements of horror. So
Well, and
I think
this
you touched
definitely
on that.
has those because
Yep.
and and I do feel bad because in the first book, I it was my first book I had ever written ever, and so I handled her dear romance kind of clumsily, like her poor partner. Again, you can't even call him a partner at that point. But the guy she was meant to be with was treated like furniture that entire book, and I do feel bad about that. And I'm like,
I thought it worked. I'm going to go back to that and say I'm going to give you a pass on that because I thought it worked because there was her boyfriend from her town.
yeah, the dear boyfriend. Oh man, I didn't mean to
And
do a romantic trill or a
no, but
triangle either.
what it struck me as a way of looking at it, it was that first young like puppy love, that first love that people go through, and how that is all clumsy over here, and it's really not everybody else is saying, oh, that's who they're going to be with, and then they start to realize, no, it's not. And I thought
He's
that was,
actually kind of a jerk. No, he's
and
a
I
nice
just,
guy. They just
yeah,
weren't right for each other.
and I think that was portrayed very well throughout that first story. And I think as this carries it through, when she re-meets him again, it has moved beyond that so that they understand that. So I thought it was very well handled on that side of it.
And I can't tell you how much I slammed my brain against a wall because originally, like, he actually turned into a really big jerk. And like, he was actively fighting against her throughout the whole third book. And he was raising armies against her. And then my dear editor's like, we need to chat. I'm like, Dang it, really? Because it was taking away from the real story. Like, she did not need that kind of friction. There was plenty of friction. And so having him kind of being a jerk didn't work. And again, this could have been a COVID thing because I made several characters who aren't jerky characters. In the first few tries at this, I made them jerks. My very stoic warrior, whose name just ran out of my head. Hang on. Isbin and no, Cassim and
Yeah, I know who you
that
mean.
is embarrassing.
No. So
It'll
I'm talking
come
about
back
the
to me.
Chasm's soulmate.
Cassim's partner. I can remember Cassim because that's my father's middle name, and Issa, got it.
Okay, there we
I
go.
get
Yeah.
there in the end. Yes, you forget your own characters. It's not personal, I swear. Um,
It's another
no,
aspect of COVID. Uh,
it is. She's a stoic immortal warrior, like very zen, very much level-headed. And there's a whole scene where she goes and decks the main character's dad. Like she loses touch. And so I had to take that whole thing out. I'm like, why did I make her mean? Why is she so annoyed? I'm like, crap, I'm projecting. I was projecting so bad. Um, I
everything.
got
I can see that
sidetracked.
going through all that lockdown and all that.
There was some pent-up aggression, I think. And it came out. And so I had to rewrite the book when I was a little more level-headed, I think.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one other thing too that kind of goes in this book. Yeah, you start off with a prologue.
And
That's,
I know I never did that with the other two.
but it jumps way back in history.
It
So it sets
does.
that sets up so much of what we see come up. But is that the concept of something that you had at the start? Or is that another one that as you got into the rewrites went, we need to make these changes and move forward?
Again, I wish I could say that I had this whole thing beautifully planned out from the beginning and it stayed that way. Um, but between each book, like I would learn new things about how the characters wanted to work and how the world worked, and just like, yeah, that doesn't match my original idea. But the first book's already printed. So what do we do? Um, and so it's not a reinvention, but there's this exploration of what would make your villain a villain, what turned your villain into a villain. Like, all villains have a backstory. And so for this book to work, we finally need to get this nugget of what made our villain the villain. And so that's where this prologue came from. And I fought with myself because I'm kind of against prologues because usually they're info dumpy and boring, or they have nothing to do with anything in the book. And so you're like, why did I read this? I don't know why it's here. But for this, I'm like, it couldn't have worked as a chapter one because it was so far removed from the rest of the story. And so they're like, it has to be a prologue. I'm like, I have feelings about that, but okay. And so we have this glimpse of the villain origin story there and how this portal world kind of came to be, this mirror realm, um, which sets up how the rest of the book needed to fall together so that the big dramatic end game could happen.
I think one lesson that we can kind of share out is if there's anybody that, as they watch it, if they want to write and they have what they think is a really good first book and they do, and then they're kind of challenged with, moving that from book one to book two to book three and maybe even further, that you do have that option of making some slight changes as long as it keeps the story good that can actually build the world bigger out. And I think you did very well at accomplishing that.
Why, thank you. Because I think in book one, the villain is like, in every instance, she's portrayed as an actual demon, like a shapeshifter. And like she's described as a spider that's like unfurling herself. Like everything about her is almost alien. And like she gets described as like a weird elongated face with like pointy teeth. And like she actually was shapeshifting in the first book. And as we learned more about her story and her backstory and like what made her tick, I'm like, she's not a demon. She's not a demon. She's the one that betrayed everybody, thus the Stonebearers betrayal. Yeah. And so the verbal gymnastics that had to happen in book two, as the characters themselves are like, hang on, we've just received new information about this character that we like. I guess that's one way to do it. Is it the best way? No. If I had really written the whole series out before letting it release into the world, I probably would have massaged it a little better and given some better Easter eggs in the beginning. But it was a learning process. I was still learning.
Yeah, okay. So that's some really good stuff there. So you've also, if we step away from Stonebearers and the Shadow Barrier, you've also done a lot of work with short stories. So
I do.
I
I
want to
like
ask,
them.
and I've seen that you've been published, in fantasy and some horror and some different things. Um, what is your favorite genre to write in?
Ooh, anything with magic, like I am very much enamored by the idea of forces that are beyond what normal people can do. And so having that little hint of something special just makes me happy. So quite a few of my stories have dragons in them because I think dragons are pretty cool. And the worlds that dragons inhabit and their people, I find them fascinating. So I do love doing a lot of fantasy with the magic and with the dragons, although there always tends to be a little bit of horror because, like any good story, it's got to have horror
Mhm.
and a little bit of romance, I guess.
Yep, got to build a
So,
little bit of that dread and kind of go from there.
little existential dread.
And like they say, even the most renowned horror has some romance.
You kind of have to,
Yep. Even it just kind of popped in my head. Even the movie Alien, who's what's considered one of the best horror films ever made, has romance.
just
It's
a
with your
little.
cat, but it's there.
I'll take.
So it works. So you kind of touch on fantasy and you all do these. So kind of looking forward, um, what's coming next from Jodi Milner after Stonebearers?
I am just finishing up a new short story that I will be submitting to an anthology, and this one's I've never done a classic monster story before, but this is a vampire werewolf story because I'm like, it's got the horror element to it, and that has kind of a hint of magic because vampires and werewolves have special powers, kind of. And so, but this specific anthology wants it to be in a historical setting, and so I've put them in the turn of the century Paris. Because werewolf in Paris and like it's a good fit. It's just it lends itself. And so I had a lot of fun with that because this particular editor is going like she's expressly stated if Lynn if you're listening, I'm so sorry.
Lynn's good. Lynn's
I
good.
love Lynn. Um, she says no sparkly vampires. And I said challenge accepted. He doesn't his skin does not sparkle and he's not an angsty teenager. And so but he might have a terrible fondness for outfits that glitter. Not a la Liberace. Remember, turn of the century, you don't have lame yet. No gold lame, but he does have a very spectacular glittery coat. Um, so I have a sparkly vampire, and I
So
have no regrets.
I don't think that's a problem. I mean, Dresden has the white vampires, which kind of come close to that. So I think you're good there. So
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
shall we shift gears a little bit? Because years ago, after your first novel, when I reviewed that, you wrote an article for Guildmaster Gaming that we published about family gaming.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it you are into role-playing games and other tabletop games still?
Yeah, we I have one kid that's very much into D&D and role playing, and then the rest of my family like board games and table games, and so um every couple weeks we'll pull out one. Um just recently learned Ticket to Ride, which is almost a risk strategy kind of game.
It's right there.
There you go. See, it's a winner. Um and so yeah, we still very much enjoy doing games, more of the creative ones generally. I hesitate to admit we have a very, very thorough collection of Cards Against Humanity. Um, we do weed out the spectacularly inappropriate ones.
You make yours family friendly?
We make ours family friendly, but you can have a lot of fun with just the ones that are family friendly too.
Okay. So do you play other games besides D&D? Do you get into other style of games or genres or?
I have been known to be obsessed with video games from time to time.
Oh, okay.
My most recent one is Witcher 3, and I've been on and off trying to finish it for the last couple months, but that's one of those ones that take like a small lifetime to get through because I may or may not have a tiny crush on Geralt. Uh, yeah.
It's amazing. I know a number of women that do. So
It's not because Henry Cavill played him because I read the books first. See, I'm a nerd. I proudly admit
proudly
that.
a nerd. That's one reason why I think you probably accepted my invite to discuss your book because
Absolutely, nerds unite.
so let's kind of step away from all this for a bit. And outside of your writing for your own works and gaming that, you're involved, I know, in like the League of Utah Writers, helping them out and
Yep.
doing different things. So what other things that are maybe writing associated that do you do? I mean, do you
Oh
teach
goodness.
coursework, you know, do presentations, things like that?
So I do a lot of teaching. I'll teach at writing conference several times a year, although with COVID it has slowed down a bit. A lot of times I will teach the mental health aspects of certain things. So I have a course on imposter syndrome that's been really big lately. I've done one on grief cycle, but switching it on how you can help characters through really tough transitions, because generally a story is a character experiencing a really significant change in their life and then how they cope with that. And they fall through the steps of the grief cycle really nicely. So that's been a really interesting way of approaching how to build a story using human psychology, which is kind of cool. I also write for a small blog called Strong Moms. I do psychological tips. Some of them, like, they're just short little articles. I do it once a week. Like, if you're not feeling so hot, you can still try to smile. And then your brain's like, if you're smiling, you must be something right must be happening, and it can give you a lift, which sounds, it was a short article, but but like just there's hundreds of them. Just little things you can do to make your life easier and better. Um, Positive thinking, a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy type ideas.
Okay. Sounds like good stuff. I can relate to that. My background is in sociology.
There you
So,
go.
and okay. So moving forward, if someone wanted to hear you give a presentation or meet you someplace out at one of these events for the upcoming year, what events are you looking at doing?
So the ones on my calendar right now, League of Utah Writers has the prequel, which is on April 29th. I have two pre-recorded lectures within that. And I think it actually is imposter syndrome and the grief cycle one. But I wouldn't swear by it because I recorded it for them like 4 months ago and now I can't remember what I gave them. They're good. I just can't remember what they are. Um, and so that's the closest thing that's going to happen. I will be at the Quills conference as well, although I don't know if I'm on the faculty yet. I was on last year, so if they keep rotating through, I may or may not be, and that's okay. But I will be attending. That is August 11th through 13th, I believe. I may or may not be at the Marriott Slaterville Ren Fair. Um, I'm looking at a couple of the dates there, and Fairy Week looks fun, so I might be at Fairy Week.
I haven't heard that one.
That's the thing. It's an adorable tiny Ren Fair. But yeah, it's over by Willard Bay.
Okay.
And it's Slaterville. Just fun to say.
I always thought it'd be fun when I'm driving by that sign if it would make a great cover for a slasher type and kind of change Slater to Slaughter.
Slaughterville. I slaughtered a man. Sorry, I stole that.
I do think that there is one other one I've usually seen you at, and that is FanX. Usually you're with it's out on the vendor floor.
They've changed the way they're doing their presentations this year, so I am crossing my fingers that I can get myself into as many fun panels as possible. But I'm usually there at a table and hopefully part of the programming, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I haven't seen anything yet. I actually pitched a presentation or a panel for the writing track. And I do know I've been told they're counting on me as part of the gaming track.
You've got a reputation to keep, sir.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens because, like you said, yeah, with the change in the leadership there over the programming, we're kind of waiting and seeing.
Yeah, trying new things.
Yep.
Not my favorite. I don't like people to change things.
Don't like change.
Don't like change.
Okay, so here's a question I always kind of throw out to people for their respective fields. You've done some teaching. It sounds like you're kind of more along the line of teaching the next level, not entry level for writers, but kind of that next thing of taking what you've got and building it better. But if you're approached by someone that says, I want to start writing stories, what advice would be your first thing of advice to give to a new writer, someone that's just getting into it?
That's either very easy or very hard. So the first thing that comes to mind is the acronym BIC OC TAM. Button chair, hands on keyboard, typing away madly. Because if you don't have words, you don't have a story, and you don't have anything to show someone who can say, hey, you're doing this part really good. I would love to see you do a little more of this part. You can't get feedback if you don't put words on the page. And so, yeah, button chair, hands on keyboard, or transcription or dictation, or, pick your poison, and working madly. I think our biggest fear is that we're going to put a paragraph on the page and then it's going to yell at us about how awful it is. I'm like, they don't do that. You might feel it's really bad, but everyone has to start somewhere. And so the more words you can put down, the more you learn about how you like to put words down and the ideas you like to play with. So just start.
And I think Stonebearers Redemption is actually a perfect example of what you just gave as advice. You got it written, you got advice, which led you to be rewritten at least once.
At least.
Turned out a very nice book. for the completion of the trilogy.
And it feels so good to be done. Although now I'm like, ooh, I have an idea for an epilogue. Wait,
You can always write
I
us
will
together. Yeah,
put it somewhere else.
I've actually talked to some others where they said, "Oh, I finished my trilogy." So I was like, "Okay, you plan on anything else?" I go, "Well, I wasn't," but all of a sudden they start going, "I might have an idea for a continuation of the story later on." So I mean,
Yeah.
I think we always got that option because I mean, you are dealing with immortals.
Yeah, they're going to be around for a while. Um, so yeah, I do have I don't know if I ever shared the prequel novella with you, but I do have a freebie novella for any interested party that leads into the story. It happens 18 years before the beginning of the first book, and it's kind of an origin story of a very significant thing that happens off the page, but you hear about it in the first book, and this is it actually playing out. That's vague. I can be vaguer.
Well, actually, having read the first book, I probably have some ideas of what it's about.
It's not exactly like a mystery. Um, well,
Especially once you get through book one, it's kind of like,
in
oh,
the
there it
second
is.
book, they spell out what happens, but it's just a question and answer thing where it's just like, why did this happen, Dad? Oh, this is why. Yeah. Uh, it's not as exciting.
So that would give a firsthand account. So would you like to share where people can follow you or kind of see where your work is at, your website, your social media account, anything like that?
Absolutely. So my website is jodilmilner.com. So JodiLMiler. We are wheat grinders, not hat makers. Nope, I said that wrong. We are hat makers, not meat grinders.
Milner, not Miller.
Thank you.
No, that's good.
That is my website. That's where you can find that free story, if you're interested. And then I also have a Facebook, I have a Facebook page with my author information. So that's going to have like all my upcoming events, and that's going to have any interesting like news related stuff that's come up. But I also have a fan group where we kind of just talk pop culture and fantasy, however it comes up. So it's kind of a potpourri bag of mixed stuff. There's not generally a running continuate, like there's no continuity there. So you can jump in right where you are and just have fun there. And that is Jodi L. Milner's Magical Mayhem. Um, and where else am I? Do I do anything on TikTok? No. Do I lurk on TikTok and watch it? Absolutely. Do I want to start one? Yes. Unless he gets banned, and then I have feelings about that. Um, so the places you can find me are my website and on Facebook. That's where I'm most active. My newsletter is hooked on both of those, and I send that out every week. And there's always freebies in there, and like my writing process and the random things I'm doing. So
Okay.
it's good stuff.
All right. So before I wrap this up, is there any final thing you would like to say to anybody that might be watching?
I'd say if you are a fan of epic fantasy with a lot of drama and danger and death and maybe a touch of kissing, then I would love you to give these books a try, and then come back and tell me what you think.
All right. So we want to thank Jodi Milner. Thank you for joining me on this time. I will include a link to the article I've written on which will be up on Guildmaster Gaming, blogspot.com, but I'll put a link in the notes of this and probably in the comments also. I ask people, if you like these interviews that I'm doing with authors and directors and game developers and so forth, please like and follow, subscribe to this channel so I can start doing more. We got a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of things starting to line up really quick. It's been fun pulling together after being a writer reviewer for over 10 years to reach out to people like you, Jodi, who I've worked with in the past so that we can find out the inner workings of your minds. So,
That's dangerous.
so thank you once again, everyone. And like I said, we'll see you around. I'll be at the different conferences with you probably.
All righty.
All
Can't
right.
wait.